Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Review anything and everything. And today we're getting into this mock build of mine. This is my Lego Capital Space City Planet mock, aka Coruscant type of style mock. So I did a build before of a desert space planet mock build, a little kind of section in a space desert type of mock, similar to Tatooine or Navarro, or anything else you want to compare it to within the Star Wars realm that is desert-like. And I like the way they came out, and it pretty much was a very simple build. And this is the same thing. This is my simple build. So the idea behind that is it's just using parts that are basic parts, no crazy parts, this and that. Now, this is something I did add into it. It's not required for the build. And in the build process, I had did a video on a review on that, because those are all these bricks. First off, none of them are Lego actually bricks. They are Lego styled bricks, so they're third-party bricks, and that is from a company that I'm gonna have the I'll put the link in the description for the video of the review that I did on that, because I got that from Target. It's called like BLD, something like that. I forget exactly the abbreviation, but it's 4-letter abbreviation, Lego style bricks. So, but you can get that anywhere. Anyone can have whatever. You get that from Lego, you get that from anywhere. That's not a main part of the build in terms of, you could put anything there. It's just supposed to be a monument in between. But anyway, I digress. All the parts for this, link's gonna be description down below, just like they were in the desert build. And this was something I had the idea of since that desert build all at the same time. And similar to that build, if you guys ever happen to have watched that and the breakdown on that, I had mentioned that I was inspired by a plan that I was making about what Lego could do in terms of making their own, bringing back their space theme, and some ideas I had, which were a little bit, went hand in hand with some Star Wars types of concepts, but making it more generic. And so this was a plan that I wanted to do for a while. And I think it came out pretty well, and we'll kind of go over it. I apologize in advance for the angles, if some of the angles are not the way that I will want them to be, but we're gonna try to work with this as best as possible, because it's very dynamic in terms of the heights and whatnot, and me being able to get into every little thing. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show that this right here is all elevated. Everything is elevated. And the reason why is because this is supposed to simulate how in some capital city space themes that everything is elevated. It's thousands of feet above the ground. This is not limited to just Star Wars. You have, I don't know a whole lot of examples that are like this, but for example, you have Blade Runner. A lot of things were very high up with, very tall skyscraper buildings and whatnot, where things are joined from atop each other. You also had, what was that movie? In The Fifth Element, a lot of people don't ever point out the fact that when you have a Bruce Willis character at home and they don't yet go on their journey, in his city, wherever he lives at, everything is very high up, and there is a lower area, which you see in that car chase scene. But nonetheless, you do see in that scene, like the underground area is very dirty and messy, and everything tries to stay elevated, never touching the bottom. Now, Coruscant is like that as well, where you have the underground area, which is like the lower levels is more like the shady, underground, black market, all that kind of stuff. Everything like underground you could think of is shady is literally underground. And then everything on top is where everything is kind of more ritzy, prestigious. People have the money, all the people wealth live. So that is what this is to simulate here, giving it some height to give it that sense of that the edge here is thousands of feet down below, and you're not trying to fall off the edge, because that is a huge deal. Now I'm just going to cover some of the buildings real quick, and then we're going to go dive into the deep of those buildings. But first, just giving the brief, the general layout of this little setup here. So here we have the landing pad here, and at first this wasn't going to be part of what I was going to build, but then I realized it occurred to me. I don't know if I was watching something else or something else just kind of hit me, but I was like, I need a landing pad. I think I might have been watching some other content that not specifically a Lego build, but something revolving around Coruscant or something like that. I'm not too sure. And it dawned on me. I think what it was is I was thinking about episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which is my favorite. And, that scene where Anakin and Obi-Wan are chasing the bounty hunter in the speeder car. And, you got to have a place for things to land. And so I ended up building this here, which is the landing platform. So here's an example here that a person could come, land their ship, and then they would get off and walk to do their business in this main city area of the planet. Now, it accommodates most ships, fighter ships, and most things that are a relative size. In the build I had showed that, in the instructional build, I showed that I took my custom ship, my Grief Karga custom ship, which I showed on this channel before, and I fit that there, which is pretty massive, and it still works. And I did a lot of work underneath it. And if you look back, like I said, at the video where I built everything up, how I did to support this, I did a lot of work to make sure that it was supported, because I wanted everything to be on the base plate, and certain things in this build versus my desert build. The desert build, everything is right on the base plate. On this one, things started to kind of come outwards from the base plate, because it's to kind of contain it. It takes a lot, but within that, I didn't want it to extend off the edge of the base plate on the floor. So everything that was going to extend off the base plate had to be elevated. So the same thing with this is elevated, and it comes outwards, but it's able to support fine. Now, the idea also too is that I don't need it to be any big of a platform for this, because the idea in story wise would be that this would be the kind of place where if someone had a big ship, they'd park a big ship at a shipyard area on the planet, and then they would be ferried over by like a little cab or some type of smaller speeder or land speeder, similar to like Luke's land speeder type thing, except obviously what Anakin and Obi-Wan was riding in, like a car, we'll just say a floating car, to bring you over here for you to conduct your business. Now, this building right here, this little kind of, not really even a building, but this little structure here is just going to be a food vendor, like more of like a fast food vendor type of person is what I'm thinking of when it comes to that. And then also too, this one over here in the middle is going to be like a vendor who sells some goods. That's it. He's got like one of those kind of like corner booth window stands, except obviously he's got like a more kind of roof setup and whatnot, but it's not very big. So he's just going to be selling things on his counter there. Let me take this off just so we can get up in there a little bit. And so you can see that there. And then, all right, what I decided to do was just remove the tree, because it just helps for us to visually see things. And I'll put that back later on. That is a centerpiece, and I'm going to get into that in a moment. Matter of fact, I'll jump into that now, what that represents. I'm not going to put it back up, but I'm going to say what that represents. So there is an episode, and I want to say that this was either in the Book of Boba Fett. I really believe it's the Book of Boba Fett, or is one of the Mandalorian episodes, where they show Coruscant, and they show this big platform area with this big rock in the middle, almost like the centerpiece of like town square. And I always really loved that scene, because it was, this huge open platform, like I said, like a town square type of vibe, with the center rock in the middle, like the equivalent of a little monument or a statue, except it was a huge rock. And on the side of that entire platform, which was like maybe in our world, human blocks, it was like blocks long, blocks wide, like it was very wide, and almost like the size of a stadium. And on the side of that, you had buildings and this and that, but the walkways that just kind of went from that open area outwards to different places, but in the background you kind of knew it was surrounded by buildings, and it was almost like this just big open courtyard area where people could walk through, pass through, talk, this and that. So I wanted to mimic that, but I had to bring it down to a smaller scale. So that's what this was. And even though it does take up a lot of room, and I could have downsized it to have a smaller footprint, I mentioned that inside the build process, I decided to stick with this for now because I liked having the green, even though I could have made a smaller footprint where it's just the tree and then that light brown circular 2x2. It could have just been that. And that's it. It would have gave me more walking room for people around the area, but I did like building that up to be that centerpiece. Now the building over here, and I'm gonna take this piece off. This building on the floor level is supposed to be a merchant, but on the upper level is supposed to be possibly a rebel hideout. And so the interiors are just kind of basically like done in a basic way. I didn't like boost them up right now, and maybe later on I will. But here shows I decided to go with this idea of turning this into, this is the elevator, because in this desert space build, I built a set of steps up one of the taller buildings. That's the only set of steps that I had. But that becomes tedious. It becomes a lot in a city like this where everything is, you know, more high end. You aren't going to have steps unless it's for decoration. Steps are only going to be there more for decorative, for a prestigious kind of artistic way in terms of the artisticness of the building. But you wouldn't have steps if it's inconvenient or take up too much space, because you have that kind of technology where everything's gonna have elevators. So I decided just make an elevator on the side. Now it's not a working elevator, but it's just to represent an elevator. So you can kind of use your imagination when it comes to how do they get up where they're going. You could just think of it like that. So what I did here is you can see there's a split here because I want it to be where I can take this off. And I might have to change up how I do the studs. I didn't want to run out of certain things. I was using these as a form of jumper studs. Because like I said, everything here is basic. I'd not use anything that no one else couldn't just have inside their collection, or if they want to buy it off the parts that I did. As I mentioned before, the parts cost in total usage less than $100. It would cost you probably about $100 to have the pieces for this. Actually a little less, but you aren't even going to use all the pieces. So this right here is the top floor. And so there it is. They come up the elevator. I have this as a bed there, and I centered it because if it was against the wall, what would happen is they wouldn't be able to lay down, put their arms there. So I use you have the 2x3, you're able to put like a 1x2 brick right into the little holes that go in between it, and then you can centerize it, and then I put a little table there for now. This may not stay like this. I might change the orientation, but this is supposed to be almost like a hidden like rebel or secret hideaway upstairs above that merchant's location. So that way, you know, if somebody is in town and they have some kind of secret thing that they're doing, they can come to this place and no one in the little town area would even know that there's things going on, or maybe like a spy thing, or whatever the case is. Here, we're able to look at the inside of the merchant's area. I didn't do too much on it, but later on, I'll probably decorate those tables with a couple of items, and the merchant will just kind of stand in the middle. Obviously, I don't have any things for doors other than having the opening. You know, if I do later on get or purchase doors, I'll do that. For now, they're just openings, and it represents where the door would be. So once again, like I said, this is all a simple build, so I'm not trying to do anything that goes outside of those bounds. Okay, so I already showed this building here, but I'll take that off anyway. You can see all it is just a spot for the vendor to stand, and his little table that kind of goes around him, and it'll have a couple of different items on it, and that's it. He's just a basic merchant, nothing too fancy there. Obviously, you can see we've got the guardrails going along here, so that way no one falls. And yes, that takes up a lot of space from the walkway, but realistically, when you have like several thousand feet fall, you are not going to not have rails, even though it would be convenient to not have them. So here we have, now this one, I wasn't fully decided on what I wanted this to be in terms of, I had a general idea. It was either going to be a bar, a restaurant, some kind of thing like that, but I wanted to be something where people can come into and really kind of be in that space. I changed up a few times, but what I have right here, I'm not gonna necessarily stick with. Now I increased the size of these. I raised them up to be little seating areas, but then it aligned exactly with that table and it didn't look right because now it just looked like one big flat platform. It's not supposed to be that way. So I put those there for now. If I end up having, like, say, available regular seats, which I do have regular seats, I just don't know if I want to use them all inside this build, because when you have big areas like this, you could end up using up your seats very fast. And I bought my seats originally for extra seating in spaceships. So, but regular Lego seats would go really well there, because then you'd have that dynamic between their height, they'd be on the floor, but you'd know that it's a chair, and then it wouldn't be above this area here. So I'm gonna play around with that. I could just take that away and have it be a standing area where people have, like, you know, their drinks, and they come here for the guy who serves the food or whatever the case is, just give them drinks, because there's not enough space in here to be a full-fledged kitchen. So, you know, it could just be, like I said, maybe a guy who serves drinks. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. It might be a political location where people come for, like, certain things. I'm not too sure. So I gotta see and play around with that. But for right now, that is where we're at with that. Okay, so before I get to the next building, what I wanted to do was just briefly speak on the monument area, since we're getting a different angle from here. So you can see here is the bench. I have my custom dash Rendar figure there. Now, there goes the bench right here. And it's not a lot of room to walk on the sides, but like I said, I wanted to kind of build this up in that dynamic. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my tree back in now that we no longer, it's not gonna obstruct the things that we're looking at from this point forward. So let me get this tree back inside there. There we go. Okay, I think it's in there. Relatively decent. But like I said, I did like the green foliage there. I think it just gave it a more, like, grandiose feel. So I really wanted that. But I could have made the footprint smaller, and I still can. So I might be in debate with that. But then also too, because of its height is why the next building on the side here, I had to really move further out of the way of that. Now, the whole platform itself is actually leaning more towards the left side. Let me back up a little bit. The whole platform structure was leaning more towards the left side, so these had room to kind of attach to the platform. And I always knew over here I was going to build on that side, build a structure that was going to be more hanging over the platform, which is why I pushed the whole platform that way, away from us, and I was going to do that. That was originally going to be over here, but then I realized that it came too much over the tree, and I didn't want it to do that because I don't want it to cover the tree. And I think even not just from a build perspective, but even a in-universe perspective, nobody in this area will want to cover the tree because it's supposed to be a symbol of, you know, nature in this, you know, steel and concrete and whatever kind of, you know, jungle. So I didn't want that to be covered. It defeats the purpose of being open. So I pushed it more towards that side. Now, I always said to myself, because that wasn't going to be on the ground level being where the walkway is, that's considered the ground level here. Since it wasn't going to be on the ground level, I knew I wanted it to be high and huge. And I thought to myself, what kind of building do I want to build? And in this area here, I wanted to build what I am labeling as the embassy. So it's essentially a political building. If you want to view it or think of it in your mind similar to the Jedi Temple, you could use it in that way, or just a political office building where people come for high business, or not high business, but high political request. You know, maybe their meetings, maybe people come here for requests, for business requests, or, you know, kind of Senate things and stuff like that. So it's not a huge thing in terms of like how in Star Wars they have the big, you know, Senate area that they had in the prequels, but it gives you something like that to kind of play with. So originally when I was doing that, the platform here, if you look in the build video, it ended here just as a straight square that connected right here. I ended up putting this platform here because I'm just like, why not? Because I had to put this beam was going to be out here anyway. So I said, why not utilize that space? So I did, to give it a little bit more of like a little alleyway underneath the building where people might meet up. It's not like a dark, shady alleyway, but more of just like a little pocket where people might meet up and, you know, maybe have secret messages, conduct secret business away from the rest of the public, whatever the case is. Underneath there's a bench. I just extended that out a little bit, and I also was able to use that for a pillar to balance this on. But originally that was supposed to, like, the purpose of that was just to have a bench for more places for people to sit. So that was the original point of that. May not be the best place, but it's where I could squeeze it, because I originally thought I was going to squeeze it here and I couldn't. Now this right here, similar to on that side where that building had an elevator, this is the elevator, because this building was going to be high. It wasn't going to have a lower structure, and I needed to have a way to have people go up. So we have the simulated elevator, which I say that to say, like I said before, it cannot be used, but it's supposed to represent it. So there, what I did was I made a whole entrance there, so that way, like, that people would walk into it, and then you'd have the idea that they use the elevator as a working elevator there. But then I made it the other entrance, a whole exits that way in the building. So that actually was like really cool, because it gives that sense of like, okay, and that part is not attached to this building here. So what's great about it is that if I had to make some changes to this building or take it off, the elevator is not attached to it. You'll see it's only attached by two little pieces that do not affect it at all. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna come and try to see if we can get a bit of a look on this. All right, so this is kind of getting tall, so it makes it a little bit tough, and I'll see, I may have to just take this off the tripod for us to get a better see of it. Now, first off, I wanted to make this very airy, and I didn't want the top to be fully covered. So those covers that I put on it that you just saw me take off is supposed to represent like maybe glass in between it. So you have the main structure and like glass windows would be above it. So that way, you know, they can get light coming in, because this is very high and it's the highest structure, at least on this platform. And so the idea of it is it can be very open, very airy, very light coming in, because you don't need, you know, to worry necessarily about it being on the same level as other buildings near it. So there's that. Secondly, like I said, if you're interested in terms of the build process of this, go back to the video which I posted where I did the build process, because I went very simple with this. And to save bricks, because I started actually running out of bricks when I got to this point, what I did was I was like, I'm going to make it very airy and create 4 windows. And I like that. It really, not 4 windows, multiple windows. And I like that because it really added to, you know, just one, like the look of it, plus me saving bricks. Now, you can see here the elevator and how the opening is there. So that was what I was saying before. That opening comes out here. Those 2 little, you know, tile pieces that are stretching out, those are actually from a 1x4 beam or tile, if you want to call it that, coming outwards to hold on to this. So that's the only point in which that's connected to this. If you lift the elevator up, those come off, they lift up with the elevator, and then you can then pull this whole thing out of the way. So I didn't want this to be attached, but I just did that for stability. So that way it's not just pushed against it, but it stays still. But that's where that is. Now, and I'm using a lot of the beige, because all the beige plates, I didn't buy another set of gray plates at the time because I had so many beige plates left, but those are from my desert build, so don't mind. So what I decided to do here is, and I may not keep this layout, but what I decided to do, let me come from up above, is I threw in, first I had 2 tables going this way, going side by side, long ones like those. But then what happened is I realized to myself, let me build a little wall so this feels like a room, and we'll have like a lot of the bigger figures will either sit just behind this table or they'll sit around it if they have to have a full meeting. This will be like the security desk where the people first come in to get greeted. And this will have like maybe 2 people behind each desk or 1 person behind each desk. And they're going to be more of like when people come there for small issues, you know, think of it in the way of like you would almost think of like a DMV. I hate the DMV. Everyone hates the DMV. But almost like that vibe where there's always that foot traffic in the DMV, people coming in, they're just getting online, they're checking what they got to check and whatever the case is. So here's supposed to be this vibe, even though it's a smaller scale because everything's compressed, because like I said, the idea is to fit everything on this base plate. So it compresses everything. I do like that though, because it allows to say like this whole thing is one scene. And if you want to build a second one, you can, and just slide it next to it and just keep modularizing this whole thing. But with that being said, this is supposed to almost represent similar to like the DMV. For those who aren't familiar with that, Department of Motor Vehicle, where it's crowded all the time. I'm sure most of you guys know about it. It's crowded all the time. You're coming in and out. It's almost like the same way you have those political buildings in Star Wars. It's just like the DMV. People are coming in, they're filling out paperwork, then they leave, then they're coming in, then they're leaving, and all these people just going back and forth. And that's what this is supposed to be, almost like a place where people come who've got business, but imagine it more on a larger scale. Not larger scale, but the importance of it is larger than say the DMV, which is just for every regular person. There's political people coming. Maybe someone owns a business on the planet. Someone owns a business or some kind of location many miles away at a different planet. And they're like, I got to come here to get verification. I got to come here to get my documents. So they come through, the security guy, just make sure that, they don't come in with any weapons. The other people will be waiting over there. Let me just use my dash render for this real quick. And they'll be waiting over there. So they'll come over and he'll go, hey, listen, like, what do you need? They'll say, I need form so-and-so. I'm trying to register this. Okay, blah, blah. Go over to the next, take this paper, go over to the next desk and blah, blah, blah. And they'll come over there and then they'll just do that. And that'll be it. And then if there's some kind of really big thing, they could come have the meeting in the little meeting room where they stand before the head people, and they'll be sitting over there, which could be political figures of your city, or they can even be Jedi who are like working in that capacity. But if you make this build, if you want, you could turn this into like a mini Jedi temple if you want, and use it in that regards. I will encourage to say to everybody, do not be bound by the limits of your locations having to be exactly like Star Wars, because they don't have to be that. Your locations can be any way you want them to. That could be your Jedi temple if you wanted it to be that. But anyway, that's what this is, a political building here, the embassy. And so here you could see also too, just the windows. Like I said, I'm glad I was able to do that. I reinforced these underneath here with those 1x4 beams. And it worked out good for the framing to have windows, being that I don't physically have windows. And by having that shape, if I wanted to add windows at any point later on, if I actually had regular Lego windows, I could do that. So there's that. So I think it came out good. Like I said, obviously you see little things like this is because, to make the shape fit well, I had to do that because I don't have curved pieces going on here, which allows everything to line up exactly, or I don't have 1x1 bricks. So if you had those in your collection, you can do that. I don't have that. I just used these generic bricks. Like I said, I'm going to put the link down below where it's just 1x4 and 1x2 bricks pretty much is the bulk of this. And that's really it. So yeah, I like the way this turned out. This is, like I said before, my Capital Space City Planet mock. I had this idea for a while, so let me know what you guys think. Hopefully this inspires you guys to do something similar. I really like it. It doesn't cost much. I go over that even in the build, and I mention it here. You literally can buy all the pieces that went to this. If you look at just the plates, and if you were to buy, I would have brought it. If I was just building this mock and I didn't build the desert one, I would have bought gray ones of this. I just didn't want to buy the gray ones because I already had these beige ones, and maybe I'll buy them later and then replace them. But if you include the beige plates, the flat plates, the bricks that are in it, all the bricks, the 1x2s and the 1x4s, in total, you're probably looking at about $80. And this used more bricks than my Desert Planet one because of the fact that I did have all the elevated beams all underneath it and whatnot. And I started playing around with where I'm going to run out. I thought I was going to run out of the 1x4, so I started using more of the 1x2s. But the point is, you aren't going to use all your bricks. And in total, this would probably cost roughly about $80. A little under $80, but about, you could say $80 on Amazon, and you're still gonna have leftover pieces. So with that being said, yeah, don't you know, think that this is not like some super expensive mock and it's simple to build. So I definitely want to encourage you guys to kind of do the same if you can. And next, what I might plan on doing when I do get a chance, it might be a while before I could do this, but I actually want to do a lower city area of the capital space city. So the ground level of the capital space city, this is representing thousands of feet up. I want to do something that represents the ground level, very compressed, very like, you know, it's not going to have a center, what's the word I'm looking for? City square in the middle or town square in the middle. It's going to be more of just similar to the space mock, but with these kind of colors, very compressed, a couple of tall buildings, just very all over the place and very underground vibe. That's something I really want to do, and I'm looking forward to doing. It'll probably be a while before I get to do that one though, but just kind of let you guys know where my mind's at. As always, you guys, before I finish, actually, I'm then gonna make a follow-up video on this, just like I did with the desert space planet one, where I am going to furnish it with a lot of my personalized pieces that I have laying around. I like to show it like this first, where there's nothing here that's really specialized. So that way, if you guys don't have those specialized pieces, you guys can see what it looks like without those. And then afterwards, I try to furnish things with stuff that, you know, I feel just bring it a little bit more to life that I happen to have and you could do on your collection for things that you happen to have. As always, you guys like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.